You go back to the Obama-Biden administration, and they rejected 1,000 well-qualified applicants for air traffic control because they weren't diverse enough. And this isn't about black people. A lot of people say, here, DEI, here, black. No, he's trying to set quotas for people who are deaf to get jobs, people who are dwarves to get jobs, people with transgender issues to get jobs.
Following Wednesday's midair collision between an American Airlines plane and a Black Hawk helicopter, the topic of hiring practices in general, but particularly at the FAA, has become an intense topic of discussion. That's the topic of discussion. The point of the discussion is to distract people from the real things that might have led to this, and also train Americans to assume that anything bad that happens in their life is the result of a minority. That's consistent for Fox. They've been doing it for decades, and this is the form that it comes in now. You saw there Jesse Waters saying that the crash was probably, I mean, he has no evidence or anything, but who cares? What's the point of waiting for that? The fault of dwarves or people with transgender issues, which is not a thing. It's just transgender people. They're people. They are, after all, people. Jesse Waters.
No, I'm going to disagree with that. There are people with transgender issues, like Jesse Waters. He has issues with transgender people.
That is a very good point.
Okay,
he clearly has derangement syndrome, and so look. I apologize again. We have to hear just a little bit more of what he had to say because we're going to be diving into the details and fleshing out what is actually going on. But first, this:
the staffing shortages Donald Trump is arguing are a result of DEI policies. You go back to the Obama-Biden administration, and they rejected 1,000 well-qualified applicants for air traffic control because they weren't diverse enough. Joe Biden had a DEI quota, and this isn't about black people. A lot of people say, here, DEI, here, black. No. He's trying to set quotas for people who are deaf to get jobs, people who are dwarves to get jobs, people with transgender issues to get jobs. It's not about race. It's every sort of underprivileged person that has issues, and they want to be able to put these in positions at the FAA. They were unable to meet their own DEI quotas. And that's what is leading to staffing shortages, among many other things. So is it the main factor? We don't know.
We don't know, but it's what I'd like to talk about right now. I'd like to talk about this because that's all we ever talk about anything. If there's a terror attack, it's DEI. If a cargo ship hits a pylon or something, it's probably DEI. It's always DEI, 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 DEI. We used to say, as I said on TDR this morning, thanks Obama as a joke. Well, thanks DEI is now what we're gonna be doing for the next 4 years. And the only part about that I really want to focus on personally is when he starts it off by saying, this isn't about race. This isn't about race. I mean, we know that it is fundamentally about race, but I love that Jesse Waters is conveniently telling us, he's helpfully telling us that they are worried that the constant focus on DEI is the explanation for every ill in society. They're worried that that is looking pretty racist. And so now he's trying to pivot like, oh, that might hurt us because theoretically we want black people to vote for us. So dwarves, transgender people, deaf people, I guess we can attack them. I guess that's okay. Well, we're not saying black people, we're not saying that anymore. But these other people, they're probably responsible for planes crashing. So anyway, we need to move on to some of what's actually going on. We're trying to dig into all this and find out what's actually true, what could actually be leading to these sorts of issues or whatever. And so the FAA, according to a Fox News report from last year, is actively recruiting workers who suffer, quote, severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelling out on the agency's website. So that's from Fox News. And if you just stop there, then it sounds really bad. And it looks like what Jesse Waters is saying is true. There is, of course, more detail to it. They go on, though, in that initial reporting to say targeted disabilities include a number of different things: hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, and on and on and on, all these different things. And so that is actually true. Some of that is direct text from the programs, from the FAA. But there's a couple issues with that, and you'll notice that none of what we're gonna describe here was discussed by Jesse Waters. First of all, this is not some sort of new thing that was put into place under Joe Biden. That's just not true. Pete Buttigieg didn't put this in. That text has been on the FAA's website since at least February 2013. So I guess thanks Obama, but also thanks Trump for leaving it in 2017 and 2018 and 2019 and the beginning of 2020. every month of which it was there, he was in charge, and they left it. Weird that also, by the way, you know where else you can find that sort of language? Well, up until today, you could find it on job listings for Fox News, where Jesse Waters works. Now, they took it off after people noted the hypocrisy, and their reasoning was they were just complying with federal law. That's why they had it there. It's not that Fox is like obsessed with like diversity or anything. They're just complying with federal law. And arguably that's what the FAA was doing. I mean, isn't that the simpler explanation, that they were complying with now more than a decade-old law? But in any event, the most important thing here is the FAA makes clear in a statement, they weren't just looking for anyone who has one of these issues, as he says, and then you're on board, go start doing air traffic control right now. You still have to pass all of the regular qualifications. They say we employ tens of thousands of people for a wide range of positions, from administrative roles to oversight and execution of critical safety functions. Like many large employers, the agency proactively seeks qualified candidates from as many sources as possible, all of whom must meet rigorous qualifications that of course will vary by position. And so the FAA apparently does have hiring quotas. There is no indication of any sort of DEI specific quotas, numbers, or anything like that. And even if you did get in under one of those things, you still have to pass the same qualifications as anyone else, as always ends up being the case in these sorts of stories. And so there's a lot more, and we're gonna dig into all of it. But Cenk, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I always knew that it was the Dwarves. They're too greedy, they dig too much, and then they release the Balrog, and then of course you're gonna have crashes. So I find that intensely comical because John's right. He's trying not to alienate a significant demographic, especially as that demographic has begun to vote for Republicans in slightly larger numbers. But he figures if you're, I could lose the dwarf vote and still be okay. We already lost the transgender vote. We've driven all of our hate towards them, right? And so all I need to do is get you mad at deaf people, but they can't hear me anyway. So I'm covered, right? Like he's comical. He's just, and I guess he's trying to be comical, but at the same time, they think he's being real. They think an army of dwarves actually caused this crash. I don't know. And remember, they is a giant spectrum of people, right? And some people look at that and go, yeah, it was definitely the deaf dwarves, right? And a lot of people go, come on, dude, right? And so now, yesterday we told you about, yes, he says the Obama-Biden administration, because he's trying to make it seem like it was recent. There's no reason to put Biden in there. There was a program about 9 years ago that was in place. And yesterday we talked about on the show, it was an absurd program. And they got rid of it. They should have gotten rid of it because they inverted it. The normal process is you go through standards, then you have other things that could disqualify you after you pass the standards. In that case, they inverted it and they had the bios first. And the questions in the bios were horrible, and their view of minorities as they're theoretically trying to help minorities was horrible. Things like, if your lowest score in school was in science, they'd give you extra credit, right? So it's just one of the dumbest programs I've ever seen. But that was 9 years ago. And then the other program they're referring to that John talked about ran right through the Trump administration and was standard diversity protocol. And can you have people with partial paralysis on the staff? Of course you can. If you think that no disabled person can work any job, you're being ridiculous. Now, on the other hand, if they said, hey, we're gonna have blind people do air traffic control, that would be a problem, but they didn't. And by the way, as always, yesterday when we do an accurate story, taking a lot of heat for it. No, you can't give them an inch, but that part is true. But now we have the credibility to be able to tell you, believe me, we're willing to take the heat and tell you if they let blind air traffic controllers on, and they didn't, okay? So and that program that they're talking about, like I said, hasn't been around for a decade. So look, what actually happened? Air traffic control, we're about to tell you, like air traffic control has a host of issues we're gonna talk more about in this show. And I think actually one of the things that probably most led to it was that the politicians asked for more flights to take off because they wanted direct flights back to their states and districts. And the experts warned them, don't do that. This place is way overcrowded. And then they're like, no, we're not going to increase any staffing at the FAA, but we're going to increase your workload. Oh, look, a crash happened because they were overworked. Probably. But to be fair, guys, we don't even know that because we have no idea what happened. So for him to go out on and try to otherize a new group of folks and get you to hate him instead of focusing on the actual problem is Fox News 101 and why you shouldn't listen to that toxic crap, right? And if you're a right winger, do you really think it was dwarves? Do you really think that? Please don't tell me you think that. And then if you say, oh, he's just trolling, he's just joking around, then why do you ever take him seriously? Make up your mind. Is he a buffoon who's just messing around, or is he saying things that are true? You can't have it both ways. And it's okay if he jokes around every once in a while and says, yeah, but I'm just kidding about that, right? But he does it. That's his normal commentary. It was dwarves and people with transgender issues that caused all the problems in this country. And you gotta be a little touched to believe that. I wouldn't let him work at the FAA.
Right, so a few things. So first of all, what's assumed by Jesse Waters here is that people who might be, we could call them diverse backgrounds, and diversity can be in many, many different forms. It could be age, it could be gender, it could be race, it could be class, it could be disability or lack, such backgrounds are not qualified, right? That's the assumption. That by his very statement, that's the assumption. The second thing I want to mention is that the DEI initiatives are usually bureaucratic, and sometimes they're corporate, and sometimes they're institutional, and they're not really deeply dealing with diversity issues and challenges, which is diversity of thought. So simply putting someone in a diversity position or a diverse person in a particular position does not necessarily mean they have the power to express those diverse positions in actual discussions and conversations. But most research shows again and again and again that diverse teams, all types, always come up with better outcomes. And there's a lot of compelling research in economics, in business, in political science that backs that up. The last thing I want to say here, which I think is very important, is we've reached this point where it doesn't really matter what they say because it just sticks, right? We're at this point where no longer does reason and rationality matter, but because everything is being fragmented by media and particularly social media to the point where there's sort of this, it's all about emotional arousal and just getting people agitated and riled up or upset or what have you, right? So in many different ways, this is the type of messaging that we will continue to expect during the Trump administration. And we should just see it for what it is, which is baiting the base to back things up and getting everybody else riled up. But nothing about this has anything to do with reason or rationality anymore.
Let me say one quick thing about that to prove Ramesh right. So on X yesterday, I put up a post about, look, DI very likely has absolutely nothing to do with this, and you don't even know what caused it. But yes, Trump's not crazy to point out that program, diversity program that did have the issue. He's not making that up, just being clear. That gets a lot of retweets, et cetera, whatever they're calling it these days, because the right wing loves it, the left wing hates it, so that gets a lot of attention, right? So then I do one about another thing that we're gonna explain a little bit later in the show to you guys in just a sec, about how, yeah, but Elon Musk bullied the head of the FAA into quitting. Why? Because he was finding SpaceX, right? And then Trump fired this person and that person, and that could be a problem. That gets some traction because the left likes it, the right hates it, etc. Then I get to, but I think the most important one is the politicians overloading the airport and not properly staffing it. That's the most logical explanation, even though we're all guessing right now because we don't yet have the information from the black boxes, etc. That one gets almost no attention because it doesn't blame Trump and it doesn't blame the Democrats or DEI. So then the algorithm, because of the nature of that beast, takes the most reasonable position and serves it to the least amount of people.
Yep.
And it takes the most inflammatory positions, whether you agree, disagree, whatever it is, but most political, it's controversial, and rises them up. And so, by the way, it does damage to logic, reason, and moderation, and all the things that on being unbiased, all the things that we should value, right? But also gives people a skewed view of who anyone is. because they don't see all the tweets, they don't see all the videos, they only see the most extreme one or the ones that are perceived as most extreme, right? So the algorithms are driving this country crazy. And they're getting us to hate each other accidentally. I don't think they're doing it out of like, woo ha ha ha, let's get them to hate each other. I think it was just like hey, that's what people pay attention to. So I'll make more money if I do that. But it has this massive downside where half the country thinks like, whatever they think about Trump causing it, and the other half thinks that blind dwarves did it, right? So this is absurdity.
Yeah.
The way that it works with these algorithms is it's reverse engineered. So basically, the engineers at these companies say they train their systems, whatever it is that is getting traction and eyeballs, which is correlated to dopamine and hormonal releases in our brain, we would work with that. It's not that they say this content is likely to grab such attention. It's that they have so much data on what is gathering our eyeballs, our attention, is clickbaity, etc. And they're able to essentially reverse engineer that. So that's how it functions. The intention is not to be destructive and polarizing, but they don't care that the effects are such. And that's very clear if we look at big tech. And the other quick thing is democracy is about dialogue. It's about reason, but it's also dialogue, right? So when you see this point where someone who's part of such a major network can be so absurdist, not only is that a rejection of reason, but it's a recognition that no longer do we have a space or a sphere of dialogue in this country. So we have to just see this stuff for what it is, which is absurdist and theatrical and playing places in particularly politically fragmented and partisan ways.
Yeah, I mean, I know somebody here who's tried to start a dialogue and then gotten severely punished for it. But that's a human problem rather than an algorithm problem.
And don't worry, I'm gonna keep trying. Thank you though for the recognition. By the way, in one moment, I think we talked quite a bit about the increased traffic. So I think we're gonna jump ahead to the final reset, graphic 11. But just to add one quick thing to what Ramesh said, I think Jesse Waters knows what his job is. So he knows that there is this bubbling up anger and frustration with the way things work and who has control and all of that. And Fox's job from the very beginning has been to disarm that or to distract it, to take that anger and frustration, the desire for actual change, and to point it at something else, something convenient, something that's not actually in charge, something that has nothing to do with the elites that control society. And so we don't know exactly what caused this, but almost certainly more funding is going to be the thing that makes it less likely to happen in the future. More government is gonna be the thing that makes it more likely, because that's how you protect people. Like theoretically, that seems like a very sane, rational thing in a government. But coming out of this, Jesse Waters does not want more funding to go to the FAA or whatever. So instead, if your anger just goes towards blind dwarves or whatever, then we don't have to raise taxes. We don't have to allocate the funding, and Fox News has done their job and Jesse Waters earns his millions. Making sure that sure, your family is still at risk of being in a fatal plane crash, but don't worry, the rich haven't been touched along the way.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.